Okay, so let's first try to do the insertion. So I'm going to insert one record in employee. So to insert a record in the any table, we have to use the syntax like insert into table name and say values. Then you have to give the values in the order of your column. So first column is ID. I'm giving ID as one. So name is I will say Shiv. Then I'm putting the date of birth. Date of birth is format of in the SQL is first year, that is 2000, sorry, 1981. Then month, then sorry, day, then month, and then we have salary say 10,000. Okay, department ID. Let's put the department ID say one. As I said that department ID, because it is a referential integrity to department table, I cannot give the department ID unless I have this department ID as a one inside the department table. So let's try to see what happens. So if I create it here, it says that cannot add or update a child row, a foreign key constant. Okay, that constant is department ID on department table. So it will not allow you to add it. So let's right now let's not add department ID. Let's keep it null. Okay. So now I have added one. I have inserted one record in employee table. Let's try to see that. Let's try to create another employee first. Let's create another employee is say Sam, and his date of birth is say 1982. Salary is say 20,000, and department is still null because I cannot create the department. So let's do this. So here I'm not able to add this record because it is duplicate entry, because I have marked ID as one and ID is primary key. So as I said, primary key will not allow you to duplicate or null value. So I need to provide another key here. So let's have its employee ID as 2. So I have created another record. Okay. So let's see the records. So that is for that I need to query to that table. So to query it, I need to say select star. That is star means I want to find out all the columns from table name, that is employee. If I do that, I can see two records ID 1 name Shiv and Sam, ID 1 and 2 date of birth, salaries, and department ID. Department IDs are still null. So let's try to create the department. So let's insert record into the department. So insert into department. You can use capital letter or small letter, it doesn't matter. So insert into department. Uh, Capital letter or small letter, that is for the queries, but in data it may matter. Okay, so for the keywords, okay, and the object name, it doesn't matter. So insert into those are keywords, and department is the table name. So insert into table name, then values, that is a keyword again. Here I have ID, department ID say one, and its name is sales. Okay, when you give the string, you have to give in single quote. Now I have created one entry in department. Let's create another. Let's create one another department, that is IT. So here I cannot create because I'm giving the ID as one, because ID is primary key. It should be unique. So I'm giving two. So I created two department. So let's select star from department. So here you will see ID and name. ID is 1, 2. Department names are sales and IT. Okay. So we have tried insertion, where we have tried select. So in the select, you can put where class. So suppose you want to do the filtering. So filtering in, suppose filtering means, suppose you want to find out records where name is IT. You want to find out departments where name is IT. You want to find out department where is ID is 2 or ID is 1, any type of filtering. So for filtering in table, you have to use where clause, where, then column name. So column name is, say, name is equal to IT. So you will get only one record. Okay. So you can apply the filtering. Now, because we have added these two departments, now let's associate those employees to this department. So we need to update the employee. Okay, we need to update the employee ID of employee table, because employee ID is right now null. So if I say select star from employee, you can see department IDs are still null. So let's update the department ID. So for updating the data, what I need to do, update table name. Then we need to say set. Then we need to put column name, the column which I want to set, that is department DPT underscore ID equal to 1. Now we know that 1 is here available in department table, so I can give 1. So let's put for Shiv department 1. So I would say, because I want to update for Shiv, so we need to filter the row for the Shiv, then we need to do the update. So we need to say update employees set department ID is equal to 1, where ID is equal to Shiv, or you can say, sorry, name is equal to Shiv, or you can say ID is equal to 1. So I will say ID is equal to 1. So for Shiv, department ID has been updated. Let's say select a star from employee. Now you can see that for Shiv, department ID is 1. It means that Shiv belongs to sales department. And let's update department ID to 2 for ID, employee ID 2. Okay. Now if you do the select star from employee, you can see department IDs are updated. Okay. Now let's try to see the delete of the record. So let's create one dummy record in department. So I will say insert into department values, say 3, and department name is dummy. Okay. So this row has been created. If I say select star from department, I can see these 3 records. So to delete it, you need to filter the data, then delete it. So delete from table name, that is department, where is used to filter. So where ID is equal to 3, right? Now one row affected, that is ID number 3 record is deleted. So if I say select star from department, again I will see only those 2 records. Okay, so this is all about Java, sorry, database concepts, where you have seen like how to create the database, how to create the tables, um, how to create data into the table. We have understood the primary key and foreign key, and we have done all the DDL and DMLs, basic DDL and DMLs. Let's try to see what is indexes. So indexes are basically useful when you are trying to do the very often uh, queries. Suppose you are doing a lot of very often retrieval, and you want to apply some filtering on one particular column. So here, if you have seen, I have applied filtering on column ID, or sometime filtering on column name. So if you are doing very frequent query, we need to do the fast searching. We are expecting a fast search. To have fast search, if you're applying filter on a particular column, that column should be indexed. Okay, then your searching will be faster. So uh, here I'm going to apply the index on some column. Remember that when you have some primary key, okay, then primary key, any column which is having primary key on that column is automatically indexed. There is no need to do the indexing on that column. So if you are trying to filter based on the name, then you may need to apply the indexes on that. So suppose you say that select a star from department, and where name is name is equal to say IT. So I'm doing filtering on this. So if I try to search departments where I'm providing some name, IT or any other things, and I'm doing very frequent uh, retrieval query, then it's good to have index on that column where I'm applying the filtering. So let's create one index on this column called name on the department. So we have to say create index, then we have to give the index name ID department, sorry, IDX department on column name. There is some problem on there is some issue. Create index, sorry, on table, that is department, then we need to give the name as indexed column. So here indexed column is name, and that index is applied on the department table, and the name of the index is index name. Okay, so you may not be able to visualize the impact of this index right now because data is too less in that department table. If there is huge number of data inside any table and you are trying to do the filtering on particular column, then it will be advisable to have index on that particular column. So let's again do the select. Okay, so here it may improve your query. Here you may not able to see the differences in the performance. It will You will be able to see when you may have very large set of data. Okay, so this is very much basic concepts of database, that is a relational database. So relational database means you have a tabular form of data, okay, in terms of rows and columns. Okay, now let's move to the JDBC. Okay, so JDBC is a Java API to access any kind of tabular data, especially stored in a relational database. Okay, so it's a Java API to access any kind of tabular data. So when I say tabular data, it is a relational database. Okay, so where data will be stored in the tabular form. That's now we have seen, right? So it's database independent API. So JDBC has in Java we have a lot of APIs which are required to do the all the DDL and DML kind of activities on any database. So those APIs are completely independent of database. So those API can run similar way um, on any database like SQL or Oracle or MySQL, SQL Server, DB2, Postgres, any kind of database they can run on. So it is database independent API. So JDBC, when we talk about architecture of JDBC, it consists of two layers. One is JDBC API. So JDBC API is basically required where application to JDBC manager connection. So this is to connect application to JDBC manager. Okay, so this is basically to a linkage between application to JDBC manager. And second layer is JDBC driver API, that is a linkage between JDBC manager to JDBC driver. Okay, so from from your application to JDBC driver, there is a JDBC manager comes into picture. So JDBC manager basically it links from your application to your JDBC driver. So JDBC API and JDBC driver API, these are the two main layers in JDBC, in Java, in JDBC basically. So JDBC API libraries make connection, viewing DB metadata, creating SQLs, executing SQLs, DDL, DML, viewing the modify and result, viewing and modifying the resulting records. So whatever JDBC API library we have, that those perform a lot of kind of activities like you can view the metadata, you can make the connection to the database, and once connection is made to the database, you can see the database details, or you can see the metadata of any table, like what is the name of table, how many columns are there, and how many indexes are there, how many primary keys are there, how many foreign keys are there, how many sequences are there on that table. So a lot of metadata you can see using JDBC library API libraries. Along with that, you can create SQLs, okay, execute SQLs, and those kind of SQLs like written for the data definition language or data manipulation language. Then those APIs are useful to view the results, view the records from the table. You can say that you can, that is used to query the records from table one, and once a result comes from the query, that is nothing but result set. So there are APIs which can view those results and they can modify those results. Okay, JDBC components, there are two major components. Like all the components are in terms of classes and interface. So in interface there are like connection is an interface, statement, result set, driver. Okay, so these are mainly for interfaces. Okay, and who implements those interfaces? The driver class of database implements those interfaces. Okay, so this is kind of a bridge design pattern. So JDBC is pretty much independent of any database. Okay, they provide the linkage from your application to your database. Okay, and from the database side there is a driver. So driver classes, those implement these interfaces. And another component is class. So driver manager is the class which is required to make the connection, and SQL exception. So when you are trying to do the any kind of SQL activity, there may be possibility of SQL exception. So SQL exception is a exception which is dealing with all kind of SQL errors. So learner need to, what is the prerequisite for this JDBC? Anyone who is working on JDBC, they have to first know about Java, and second thing they need to understand about the basic concept of relational database. That's the reason I first started showing you how relational database works, what are the basic components, and what is the basic queries you can need to write uh, about the database. Okay, so last one is all JDBC API are present in java.sql package. Okay. Okay, so basic interfaces and classes. Let's try to take a deeper dive to understand basic interfaces and classes in your Java that is used for your JDBC activities. Okay, so driver manager is a class to manage the database drivers. Okay, so it manages the connection request from application with proper database driver. So once you are working with driver manager, you have to have the driver that is provided by database. Okay, any specific database. So every database will have their own driver. So if suppose you want to do the connection of your application to a SQL server or MySQL, that will have its own driver. Okay, so driver manager, it manages the connection request from application to the proper database driver. Okay, and it uses the communication sub protocol for making those connections and for making those communication. JDBC driver, which is available on the database side, it's an interface to enable application to interact with DB. Okay, so it need DB specific driver to connect. So every database has its own specific driver, which is required to connect from your application. Okay, a JDBC driver gives you out the connection and implement the protocol transferring query and results between app and database. Okay. Generally, what type of driver we use generally? We generally use uh, type 4. Okay, that is called pure Java driver. That is supported by most of the databases, modern databases like Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server, DB2, and few more. So Java 4 is pure Java driver that uses DB native protocol. Okay. Connection is the interface having method to connect database. Okay. So it has a lot of uh, methods which are required when we are connecting to the database. Statements, once connection is done, a statement is interface that encapsulates SQL, structured query language. SQL means, in other way we can say that is queries. So a statement basically encapsulate SQL statements. Okay, that is nothing but query, and statement is passed to the database. Those queries will be passed to the database to be parsed, okay, compiled and executed. So in the when I was explaining about database, when I say select a star from employee, that is a query. So a statement, when I write a query inside the statement, so a statement encapsulates that query and passes that query to the database. So in database, what happens? It will be first parsed. Okay, parts means it will first check the validity of that query. Query is proper there or not. Then it will compile and then it will execute the query. So in case of DDL or DML or any kind of query, that will be executed. Before executing, it will be compiled, and before compiled, it will be parsed. Result set, once we execute the statement, we can get some result set. So result set is a interface that holds the data after retrieving from database. So once we make a query when and then execute that query will result some output from that query. So result set is an interface that holds that output, or you can say data after retrieval from database. It allows to move through the results. Once we have result, you can have a lot of, once you say select a star from employee, you can get 1,000 rows. So that will hold it by result set, because it is holding more than one record. So you can drill down, you can go through whole result set and try to see the each row and play with that. So it allows to move through the result. It supports all the data type to hold the hold and retrieve the data from database. So if from query, if I'm saying select star from employee, I'm getting ID, I'm getting name, I'm getting date of birth, I'm getting a salary, I'm getting department ID. So for each column, there is different data type. So once result set holds that data, it supports multiple data types to hold the each column. Okay. Type of result set. There are two type of result set based on the cursor movement. So suppose there are 1,000 records in the result set, and you want to move from one record to another record. So there is cursor movement happens. So based on the cursor movement, there are type of result set, and based on the concurrency, there are type of results. So based on the cursor movement, there are type forward, type is called sensitive, type is called insensitive. Okay, so these three type of result set that is based on the cursor movement. Okay, so type forward means it will always go in one direction. Okay, so if it will you can get the first record, then second record, then third record, like in one direction. From it will be going in the forward direction only. Type is scroll sensitive. It means that you can scroll backward, forward, and insensitive means if there is some while doing this results retrieval and navigation, if there is some change in database in that table, okay, then result set is not will not be aware of that changes. In case of type is called sensitive, it will be aware of those changes. Based on the concurrency, result sets are of two type. One is concurrent read only, and second one is concurrent updatable. Okay, so if there is something happening on the table side, it will be always sorry. Once whatever result set you are getting, those results will be read only. In case of you are using concurrence, read only. In case of concurrence updatable, you can update the records available in the result set. Okay. Now let's try to understand how to create the connection. So using JDBC, I will show you in the program how to do that. But before that, let's try to understand the theory behind that. So step two, set up the DB connection using Java APIs. First thing what we need to do, we need to load the database specific JDBC driver. So suppose I want to connect my application, my program to MySQL database. So I have to use MySQL JDBC driver. So first I need to load that driver. Then we need to create connection using driver manager. So when I use driver manager dot get connection, there are few things which we need. One is URL, that is a URL of your database. Okay, so that's like JDBC, then say MySQL or Oracle, then it is a thin, then at the rate, what is the location? Here it is saying am root, so I can use localhost, then port number and database name. Okay, and what is the username to connect to that database? What is the password to connect to that database? Okay, once these three things are available, then we can say that connection con is equal to driver manager dot get connection, passing this user URL, user and password. Okay, that will be that is the two step is required to create the connection. Okay, once connection is created, then we need to create the statement. Okay, those statement will be based on the query, because as I said, a statement encapsulates the query. Okay, SQL statement. So SQL statement is kind of DDL or DML queries. Okay, once a statement is created, then you need to execute that statement. Okay, then after execution of the statement, then you need to process the result set or other result of execution of a statement. So based on the type of the query, suppose you want to do the retrieval of the data, or you want to do the updation of the data, or you want to do the any detail operation, or you can say that you want to create some table, you want to update the table, like that. A lot of activity you can do through your queries. So once you state, and that those queries are encapsulated into the statement. So once a statement is executed, you can get the result in form of result set or in some other form. Okay, I will let you know what are the different type of execution in the statement of the statement. Okay, once your result set processing is done, then release the resource like a statement, result set, and connection. Okay, so these are the typical steps when you try to do the DB connection and execute, create the statement from the query, execute the statement, and then process the result set and release the resources. Okay, so there are few other concepts like connection auto commit. uh, when you create the connection, suppose you are doing some transactional things, like suppose you are inserting record. So you, by default, any database have something like self auto commit true or false. So when I say auto commit true, it means that whenever I do any operation, that then no need to commit that operation. Okay, suppose I want to insert employee. After inserting the employee, I can commit it or I can roll back it. That is only possible if I say auto commit is equal to false. When I say auto commit is equal to true, after doing after insertion, updation, or delete, it will commit the record. Okay, so after record is committed, after transaction is committed, you cannot roll back. Okay, so generally it is advisable to set the auto commit false, so that use programmer will have control that uh, they can commit once any process is done, or they can roll back if there is some error that occurs while executing the while processing any query. Okay, um, error, generally sometimes we see that no suitable driver error. So that error can come when you are trying to load the driver which is not available. Okay, at the time it will say that no suitable error. What are different kind of statements we have in Java? We have a normal regular statement, that is interface. We have other two interfaces, that is prepared statement and callable statement. Prepared statement is kind of a statement, uh, but there is some difference. Like prepared statement is like pre-compiled statement. Okay, and that is used for the faster processing of the statement because that is pre-compiled. And prepared statement is used to avoid the SQL injection to because if you use the statement, there is a possibility of SQL injection. I will let you know SQL injection. So SQL injection is something like you are passing some values from outside, maybe from web application, which can which can damage your data. Okay, and through query you can inject from UI or from outside. If it reaches, if that command reaches to the database, it can mess up your database. It can mess up your whole data in the data from the database. So to avoid that kind of problem is called SQL injection. So prepared statement is used to avoid the SQL injection. Callable statement is another type of statement which is required to run the stored procedures in the database. As I said in the beginning, in database you may have a lot of objects. Like table is one object, indexes, sequences, stored procedure, functions. There you can have n number of n type of the objects inside that database. Okay, so callable statement is useful when you are trying to execute the stored procedures. If you have any stored procedure written in your database, you can execute that stored procedure using callable statement. So basically, stored procedures are nothing but it is a bunch of SQL statements putting them all together to perform some kind of logical uh, activities. Okay, suppose bank is doing some activities. Okay, they want to perform some set of jobs. Okay, so what they can do, they can write one store procedure where they will have say 10 statements or 20 statements, 1,000 statements based on a certain logic that is called PLSQL. So based on the PLSQL concept, they can write those logic, and they once they can bundle those logic inside a stored procedures, and they can run stored procedure at one shot. So to run the stored procedure from the Java, they have to use the callable statement. Okay. So type statement methods, when we, as I said, when we create the statement encapsulating the queries, uh, then we need to execute the statement. So there are different flavor of executing the statement, like execute method, execute query method, and execute update method. The return type of those methods are, like for the execute method it is a boolean, for execute query it is a result set. Sorry, it is not properly spelled. So it is result set, and then we have executed update, that is return type is integer. Okay, so execute is required when you are trying to execute any kind of SQL statement. Result set, execute query is required when you are trying to execute the select queries. Okay, suppose you want to retrieve some data from table, then you have to make select queries, and to execute the select queries you need to use execute query, because it results the result set, and you can move through the result set. Okay, execute update is required when you are trying to do some DDL operation, right? You want to insert some, you want to create one table, or you want to update table, you want to delete drop table, or you want to do some DML operation like updating table, updating data, deleting data, or inserting data into the table. So those kind of data, those kind of SQL statement execution you can do through execute update, and it will return the int. So it will return how many rows are impacted or affected by that method, execute update method. Okay, so I think we have gone through a lot of theory about JDBC. Let's try to see the practicality of JDBC. So we will start how to create the connection. Then we will take some basic uh, DML operations and DDL operations through JDBC. Okay.